A surprising act by the millionaire after a black homeless girl asks to pay for eggs later. It was a chilly afternoon in London, the kind that pinches at your skin and makes you shiver involuntarily. Outside a busy supermarket, a little black girl, no more than 13, stood with her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her big brown eyes scanned the crowd. Tension twisted her small frame as she clutched a crumpled 5-pound note in her hand. She was just one of the countless souls barely managing to survive. But today, she wore determination like armor. When she spotted Richard Hale, the millionaire entrepreneur, renowned for his cutthroat business tactics, she swallowed hard. He exuded an air of power, with a sleek suit that seemed to shimmer under the fluorescent lights and polished shoes that tapped assertively on the pavement. The whispers around her were of disbelief and curiosity. Why would a girl like her approach a man like him? But Maya was different. She was brave. "Excuse me, sir," she called, her voice trembling slightly. Can I pay for my groceries later?" The simplicity of her request hung in the air like strange poetry, a blend of innocence and desperation. Everyone turned at the sound of her request, sensing the absurdity of it all. Richard paused, intrigued. Most people dismissed her, but he felt something pull at his insides, a connection. He had long forgotten about feelings like that, buried under layers of business suits and boardroom battles. "Maya, is it?" he asked, leaning closer as she nodded, eyes wide and hopeful. He glanced at her grocery basket. There were eggs, bread, and a couple of apples. Hardly a feast, but something stirred within him, echoing memories of his estranged mother, a social worker who fought valiantly for children just like Maya. "Let's get those groceries then," he said, surprising even himself. The murmurs surged through the gathered crowd, citizens both intrigued and suspicious. What did he want? Others whispered about charity or a guilt complex, prompting Richard to feel the heat of judgment. As they walked side by side through the aisles, Maya shared stories, fragments of a life lived in shadows. A shatter of laughter hidden behind thin walls, a mother who had walked out, unfazed by the cold world. Richard felt something ache in his chest, an urgency igniting his heart that had faded long ago. But as they exited the store, Victoria, his sharp-eyed business partner, stood waiting like a hawk, ready to swoop down. "What's this about?" she snapped. Suspicião redeando fra ela. Richard bristlou, sentindo medo. Não tinha pensado como a ação dela e sua marca pode levar à história da família. The crisp air seemed to press in on them, full of unspoken words. Maya stood between them, an island in a growing storm, unaware of the complexities swirling above her. She watched the duo with youthful innocence, unaware of the emotional tangle she was threading into. As winter shadows lengthened around them, they began to unravel unseen threads from Richard's life. Secrets and half-formed feelings crept up, planting seeds of doubt about his motives, while Maya battled her own vulnerability. Together, they faced uncertainty and unearthly bonds. But amidst the confusion and concern, a deeper question loomed. Could Richard truly change? And would Maya let her guard down enough to trust him? Hey, before I continue with this amazing story, I have to give you an intro. Importante warning. Many subscritores have reportado que YouTube tenha deletado suas inscrições sem avisar. Dê uma olhada rápida no botão vermelho para verificar que você ainda está subscrito no canal. Eu não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo. E enquanto você estiver lá, deixa aquela poderosa ao curte-dedo. E me contato nos comentários qual cidade você está assistindo. I love getting to know all the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. Just as the words hung in the air, a deafening noise shattered the moment. A cacophony of shouts erupted from behind them. Richard and Maya turned to see chaos unfolding. 4 figuras mascaradas irromperam na cena. Eles invadiram o supermercado. Sua intenção era clara. Todos no chão, gritou, brandindo uma barra de metal. O pânico se espalhou pela multidão. Pessoas gritaram e se abaixaram para se proteger. O coração de Richard disparou. O instinto tomou conta. Ele agarrou o pulso de Maya, puxando-a para trás do balcão de exibição mais próximo. O que está acontecendo? Ela sussurrou, com os olhos arregalados de medo. Apenas fique escondida. Richard sibilou. The fear, piercing his heart like a knife. Não era apenas bens lembros. Agora era metade de produzir. From their crouched position, they could see the masked intruders. Each one moved with alarming confidence, shoving customers and demanding phones and wallets. Richard's mind. In front of them, Leo shouted orders to the intruders, gesturing wildly. You know what to do. Get the bags. We'll make a fortune. The words landed heavy in Richard's chest. What betrayal was this? Had Leo orchestrated this entire thing? Maya's eyes widened further, the mixed emotions swirling in her gaze, fear for herself, confusion about Richard, and a dawning understanding of the darkness around her. She looked up, her voice trembling. Is he working with them? The fear bubbling inside Richard was now eclipsed by a white-hot rage. I don't know, he whispered. All his instincts screamed at him to protect this fragile girl from the unfolding chaos. But the very foundations of his world crumbled around him. Outside the store, sirens wailed closer. He had to move. They had to escape. Richard took a deep breath, shouted, Maya, now! He surged forward, hands outstretched to shield her, and they darted through the chaos. Just as they reached the door, the lighting flickered dramatically, plunging them into an intimate darkness before re-illuminating the horror before them. The masked figures had turned to look at them, eyes devoid of humanity. And Richard felt time freeze. The crowd had begun to gather again, now a wall of shocked faces, staring entranced. This was not just a robbery. It was a spectacle. Betrayal had turned into a drama, where Richard was both hero and villain. E então aquele momento, tudo mudou. Antes de fugir, uma figura máscara sprintou à frente, virando direto para eles. O grito de Maya rebentou a água, como Richard parou protetivo à frente dela. Ele não tinha tempo para perguntar a relação com a vida do Leo. E naquele momento, o medo criva na pele. Depois uma porrada, gunshot veio a sair, chateando o consciente e tudo desandando no caos. Era Maya segura? O Richard encontraria uma saída? Será que Leo estava atrás dessa destruição? Tudo o que ele acreditava era a façada, jarrado à vista, like glass. And as the crowd erupted in panic, Richard felt the ground shift underfoot, turning his world upside down in an instant. And within that chaos, deeper questions screamed to be heard. Was it even possible for a man like him to change? Or had he become the very monster he never wanted to be? The shot rang out, echoing through the store like a thunderclap. Richard's heart skipped as he instinctively turned, shielding Maya with his body, panic clawing at his throat. The world slowed, everything around him blurring into a haze of chaos. Maya's breaths quickened beside him, small and frantic. What's happening? Her voice trembled, eyes wide with terror. It felt surreal, as if they were trapped in a nightmare. But this was no dream. This darkness was choking them. Richard held his breath, trying to block out the madness. He needed a plan. There was no time to waste. He could feel the danger pulsating in the air. Yet, through the noise and fear, something flickered in his mind, a flickering memory of innocence lost, something he couldn't grasp just yet. Suddenly, a second gunshot shattered the air, and Richard turned just in time to see Leo's form. He was yelling, aggressive and wild, hands waving, like a conductor directing a symphony of chaos. "Get them," he shouted, his eyes fierce behind the mask he had just torn off. But it was Leo's face that twisted in Richard's chest, betrayal carved into every line. Richard's mind flooded with questions. How could this be happening? Leo was a friend, a brother in arms. Just days ago, they laughed over drinks at a bar, exchanging stories, planning futures. Leo? Richard shouted, voice booming over the chaos. What are you doing? Desperation filled every word, pleading for an explanation. This wasn't just robbery. It was an orchestrated nightmare. Leo's gaze flashed towards Richard, confusion softening his features. You think I wanted this? He barked, voice laced with anger. You don't know what you're doing, Richard. You're blind. And now it's too late. What do you mean? Richard felt a deepening dread coil inside him, twisting his gut. What have you done? Just then, a horrific scream punctuated the air. A woman, at the edge of the crowd, her voice filled with anguish. Richard glanced over instinctively, just as the third masked figure lunged toward them, adrenaline surging through his veins. But then, beneath the panic, something shifted. A loud crash came from the back of the store, and in rushed a group of uniformed officers, weapons drawn, shouts ringing out. The police had arrived. The masked figures reeled, and those standing frozen began to flee, an infectious panic rippling through the crowd. In this unforeseen frenzy, something strange happened. One masked figure turned, revealing a flash of bright teal hair beneath the mask. Maya's mother. Richard couldn't believe his eyes, the chaos swirling faster than his comprehension. She yanked off her mask, eyes wild with desesperação. Maya! She screamed, voz hoarse e frântico. Get away from him! Richard's breath caught. Maya's mother. But how? Everything felt like a whirlwind of confusion and betrayal. This couldn't be real. Maya. Richard breathed, shock twisting through him. Is this? He couldn't finish the question. Horror staining his thoughts. Maya's small frame shifted, her eyes darting from um face para outro. Mom, she criou, confusão estendendo. What's happening? Por que você está aqui? Uma ondada crustante me afundar. As he realized, he stands there. The precipice of despair. The mother he thought was gone, was alive. But what did that mean? Everything he thought he understood shifted around him, like sand beneath his feet. Were they victims, villains, friends, family? As the officer shouted commands, Richard felt an insatiable pit grow in his stomach. The world had just flipped upside down, and nothing was as it seemed. Would they escape? Would Maya understand the web of deception that surrounded her? Leo's eyes locked onto Richard, a torrent of emotions flaring behind them, a mix of guilt, betrayal, and something deeper. Richard didn't know who to trust anymore. Outside, sirens echoed through the freezing air, a wailing reminder that uncertainty lingered like a dark cloud over them. As chaos engulfed them, Richard faced the looming question. Could they find a way out of this? Or were they already trapped in a nightmare of their own making? The chaos swirled around them, and Richard felt as if he were trapped in a storm. He dared to look over Amaya, clutching her backpack tightly, eyes wide, tears glistening, not from the cold, but fear. He wanted to tell her it would be okay, but the words lodged painfully in his throat. Maya, he called, trying to push through the shrill cries and confusion. The moment was a whirlwind of sound. Sirens outside, officers barking orders, people shouting. It was chaos incarnate. His heart raced. What would he say to her? Before Richard could answer, he saw Maya's mother rear back from Leo, her face taut with anger and fear. You don't understand, she screamed at him, her voice a razor edge in the tumult. This is for her, for all of us. But it was too late. Richard felt a surge of dread. What did she mean? And then everything shifted like a jarring earthquake. An explosion, a deafening blast, erupted from behind the chilled air, not far from Leo. It rocked the store, sending shelves tumbling like dominoes. Richard instinctively grabbed Maya, pulling her close, as the world erupted in a symphony of noise. A fire ignited, a blinding. Light flashed, and smoke billowed ominously. "What is happening?" Maya cried, panic swirling in her voice. He could barely hear her. Richard's eyes were locked onto Leo, who stood before him, horrified. But it wasn't the fear on Leo's face that struck Richard as shocking. It was the sinister glimmer that followed. The air became heavy, thick with smoke and confusion. Shadows flickered everywhere. He barely noticed Leo slip away, right into the chaos. "Leo!" Richard shouted. But no one could hear him in the cacophony. Suddenly, as Richard tried to shield Maya from the chaos, he saw something glint in the shadows. What was that? A figure, a flash of metal, and then it all came together. "A piece of evidence, a forgotten past," shouted an officer as they pushed toward Richard and Maya. The officers were scrambling now, trying to make sense of the horror. And then that terrible connection hit Richard like a brick to the chest. He spotted a tattoo peeking from beneath Leo's sleeve, a tattoo he had seen before, on someone he'd trusted completely. His stomach dropped. The tattoo of a venomous serpent, a gang symbol. "Leo was in a gang," Richard murmured, heart pounding hard against his ribs. The revelation churned inside him, transforming everything he thought he knew about his friend. Nothing made sense anymore. Strange memories surfaced. Leo's erratic behavior, missing money from their last venture, those late-night phone calls shrouded in secrecy. Time to go. He pulled Maya toward the exit, but she hesitated, eyes glued to the chaos. "No, my mom," she shouted, tearing away from his grasp. "Maya, wait." Richard felt desperation clawing at him, but she dashed toward the scene, seeking her mother through the chaos. Just as Richard reached out, someone screamed. The officer crumpled to the floor, clutching his leg, a dark stain spreading. "Get down," the commanding voice echoed, but it was too late. Richard's heart sank. Out of the shadows, someone else stepped forth, a figure he would recognize anywhere. "Surprise, Richard." Leo smirked beneath the mask, eyes glinting with a dangerous edge. "You were always too late to see the truth." Time froze. Everything he believed shattered as the horrifying truth dawned on him. Leo had been playing them all along, orchestrating this chaos as a diversion, dragging Maya and her mother into a darkness he hadn't seen coming. Seconds ticked by. The world collapsed around Richard, his mind reeling under the weight of betrayal. All his instincts screamed that the man he once called his best friend had become something unrecognizable. Was Leo a monster? Or was he just revealing the hidden darkness inside them all? Could Richard save Maya? Or had he failed before he even began? As the scene exploded into further chaos. 1. Stark question. Lume over evento. How could he navegar o mundo onde nada foi como ele sentia? Richard ficou fechado, uma estampa de confusão adentro. Leu gozando na boca, torceu demais em seu gosto. Essa desgraça despentalhou completamente o coração. Iniciava apenas no entre ele. O caos ao longo deles, abordado por seu Odisseia, e a sombra via tempo todo, sem presente Richard. Instinto, pendo operado. Ele estava dando corre por sua mãe, desesperado para abordar o atraso. Ele sentiu um surto de emoções encrestalar. Fero, demendo dele. Maya, não, ele disse. Herbach estava aperta. Ela não tinha a vista do perigo se enfiando. Sombras nistorcadas no vento. Paineca pouco tempo, quando ex puxou o persigo, afastando a multidão. Mas aquele momento, o tempo começou a descer, e agora tanda, o parque do ar, inundação violenta, levando deafening rolls. E depois... Jenny,
Espera. E silêncio fez. Como o olho de uma fria, o caos parou em espantada. Era aí que ele sentiu a silhueta de Leo, estando todo ao lado dele, cumprimento.
His gloved hand. The kind of thing that turned Richard's stomach. A detonator. Leo! Richard's voice broke through the stillness. What have you done? Leo's eyes glinted, a twisted triumph in his gaze. Exposed you, Richard. You never saw it coming. The trust you gave, the secrets you shared, all a game to me. Maya, get back! Richard shouted, desperate now. The world began to spin. All his instincts screamed at him to run, to escape. But just as he grabbed Maya's wrist, another explosion rocked the store, sending shards of glass flying. The ground shook violently again, causing people to scream and scatter. An inferno roared to life behind Leo, flames licking up the walls, the air thickening with smoke and despair. Maya, Richard yelled as he threw himself in front of her. He felt her small hand slip from his grasp, and terror bubbled within him. Stay close. We have to get out. But Leo was still there, laughing, pushing deeper into madness. You always thought you could save them, didn't you? You were never meant to save anyone. The next moment shattered Richard's world. Maya, now. He turned, ready to flee, but she was just standing there. A irmã derrochando para ela, olhos caivos com pânico. E num instante, tudo se avaliou, o coração de Richard destaca, seu dedo pontando para o botão, haja arrastão proibida. No! Maya screamed, her voice raw with fear as her mother reached out, eyes pleading. Richard darted forward, driven by instinct. But just then, the second twist came. From the haze emerged another figure. A woman, bursting through the flames. Richard's breath caught as he recognized her. Isabella, the woman he had unthinkingly shoved aside in the fallout of his last venture. The one he'd lost in the mess of greed. I'm sorry, she cried, eyes wild, rushing toward Leo. Stop this madness. We can still fix it. You don't have to do this. A loud crack echoed as Leo turned, fury igniting behind his mask. You ruined every chance I had. It's too late for us. Richard's heart raced. Este era mais profundo do que ele pensava. As destruições se avizinhavam. Tudo estava à beira do abismo. Isso tudo fazia parte de uma dança que ele jamais imaginou estar participando. Quando tudo tinha se tornado mais do que apenas questões pessoais. Naquele momento de caos, tudo parecia estar descontrolado. Eles conseguiriam sair dessa? Ou a traição estava se fechando sobre eles como um laço, apertando a cada segundo que passava? A mente de Richard girava. Confiança despedaçada. Relationships transformed. The ground beneath him felt like it could crumble at any moment. Time was running out, and he had to make a choice. How far would he go to save Maya and himself from? The web of chaos spun around them. Everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. Richard's heart raced as he took a step toward Maya, begging her to stay away from danger. The fire flickered in the corner of his eye, casting strange shadows on the walls. Maya, please. He could barely keep his voice steady. We have to go. But she was fixated on her mother who had just torn off her mask. Maya's face twisted in confusion, lost in the madness that had unfurled around them. Mom, she cried, her voice cutting through the chaos. What's going on? Maya, no, Richard shouted again, tightening his grip on her arm. He felt the heat of the flames behind him, the smell of smoke curling into his lungs. Leo still stood there, the detonator poised in his fingers. A confident grin spread across his face, a shimmer of madness in his eyes. You really think you can save her, Richard? Look around. This is bigger than both of you. Suddenly, an unexpected sound sliced through the air, a low rumble, followed by a loud crash. The back wall of the store shook and collapsed under an unseen weight. Richard's breath caught as he spun to see what was happening. Through the dust and debris, a dark figure emerged. A massive man, muscles straining against tight clothing, eyes glinting with unfiltered rage. It took Richard a moment to register the familiar face. "Sam," he whispered in disbelief. Sam was a former soldier, a man who appeared out of nowhere to save the day. But now he was here, pushing through the chaos with bone-deep determination. "What are you doing here? Get away from her," Sam shouted, lunging toward Leo. "This ends now." Before Richard could react, Sam crashed into Leo, knocking the detonator from his hand. It clattered to the floor, but instead of falling apart, a chilling realization washed over Richard. Something was off. As chaos surged around them, something deep inside Richard twisted and churned. "Sam, wait!" he shouted, pushing forward before disaster could strike. He had never seen Sam so fierce, so unyielding, but it was too late. A loud crack echoed through the turmoil. Sam had just grabbed Leo by the collar, lifting him high, inching toward the very edge of the flames spreading behind him. "Stop!" Richard yelled, desperate for a moment of clarity. "You don't understand. This isn't—" Then it happened. As Richard shouted, a glint of reflection caught his eye, the detonator rolling toward Maya. In a split second, she dove for it, hand outstretched. "No!" Richard screamed, instinctively reaching out, but he was too far away. Maya snatched it up, eyes wide in realization, breath catching in her throat as her fingers curled around the cold metal. The world seemed to freeze, as if everything hung in suspense, every heart in the store collectively pounding. "Give it to me," Richard shouted again. But there was panic now, a storm brewing in Maya's gaze that he hadn't seen before. "Why?" she whispered, the weight of the world pressing into her shoulders. "Why should I trust you?" "Maya, please!" Richard's heart thudded in desperation, but as the words left his lips, the air shifted. Before Richard could comprehend the depth of her conflict, Maya raised the detonator high above her head, her voice breaking. "You think you can control everything? I won't let you." The crowd gasped collectively. The tension was palpable, hearts beating like war drums. Richard's eyes widened in horror as realization crashed over him. "Don't do this." He felt sick. "You have to give it to me." But her eyes held an unexpected fierceness. "No, you need to see what this world really is." Everything shattered in that moment. Richard's world turned upside down. Maya's defiance sparked a power in the air that was almost palpable, as if she was summoning something from deep within. Leo, caught between outrage and fascination, suddenly laughed, a dark sound that echoed through the chaos. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for, but you don't know what you're messing with, kid." And then the unimaginable happened. Maya pressed the button. A tâmberos boom ressonou, chacoalhando a fundação da sala. O coração, e não somente a da explosão que mudou seu coro, foi a chente subitânea da Maya. A inocência foi deixada em claridade. O que queria dizer? Recebeu isso, espencar as palhas com cuidado, respondeu. Os cálces enfindados e preencheram Richard ali. E então descendeu, engolfando tudo em uma cobertura assombradora. O único sombrado era o coração palmeiro que batia apertado uma desforma e bemorida, mas onde pelo menos ela fosse. Depois. All. As the dust settled, everything hung around them. He was suspended on the precipice of a truth he couldn't bear to face. Would he ever really know Maya? And was this the end or merely the beginning of a nightmare that would consume them all? The dust settled around Richard, a thick haze hanging over the remnants of chaos. His heart pounded painfully in his chest as he gripped Maya's shoulder, her small frame trembling next to him. A panic-filled silence loomed, broken only by the crackle of distant flames and the hum of sirens approaching. But as he stared into her eyes, their innocence now eclipsed by something darker, an unbearable weight descended on him. Maya, he whispered, not knowing what to say anymore. This was a child, a brave girl caught up in a nightmare. What had just happened? Then, everything shifted again. The shockwave from the explosion had seemingly froze time, but suddenly the sound of heavy footsteps snapped Richard from his trance. A figure emerged through the dust, a tall man cloaked in shadows, walking with an unsettling calm through the wreckage. Richard squinted, only to feel his stomach drop. It was Leo, but he looked different. Stripped of his arrogance, a haunted expression clouded his features. "You don't understand," he rasped, voice hoarse, eyes darting around wildly. "It's bigger than you think. We weren't supposed to. This was never my plan." "Maya," Richard shouted desperately. But she stood rooted to the spot, mind racing. And then, in the surreal madness, that's when it happened. From behind Leo, the wall of the store cracked, and another figure stepped into view. A woman, desperate and wild, her face familiar. Richard's breath hitched. It was Isabella again, right behind Leo. But this time, she was holding a gun. "No," Richard cried out, reaching out as time splintered. "Get back." But Isabella's eyes were set. Determinação e tipo em sua faceta. "Isso é para você, Richard. Você precisa saber a verdade. Afaste dele." Leo rorrou. Dire 4 para cima. O caos eruptou a novo. Vozes cascando como todo mundo gritava. "You don't know what you're doing." "Maya, stay back!" Richard shouted, fear ripping through him like fire. But it was too late. Isabella's hand quivered, but her aim was steady. "It's time for you all to see who you really are," she shouted, as if the truth itself spoke through her. Then the impossible happened. With a frantic click, she turned the gun on herself. "You'll never win. I know the truth." And just as Richard lunged forward to stop her, the world flickered. A blinding light exploded from the gun, casting eerie shadows as the shot rang out. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Richard couldn't think, couldn't breathe, his heart shattering as he realized what had just happened. But then, in the shocking stillness, Isabella collapsed to the floor, revealing what Richard never expected. Slumped next to her was a blood-stained envelope. He dove earlier but now hesitated. An ache grew inside him, heavy with dread as he reached out, pulling it closer. In that envelope, Isabella gasped, eyes fluttering. The truth of who Maya really is, from the very start. I wanted to protect you both." "What are you saying?" Richard's voice trembled as he tore it open. And there it was, a birth certificate, but it wasn't just anyone's. It was Maya's, but also something deeper. There were names Richard never expected to see. Leo peered at it, shock morphing. Em eles olhos, mas ele parecia estremecido como engranada viva. A sala de repente se esteriliza. Richard's pulso respirava. Quão delicado e sabia essa pedra de mentira. Esse parecia ter feito uma peça cada vez. Onde tem que estar parada a ponta do rastro. Olhos viram para Maya. Standos, tremendo. Richard sentiu o tempo esquecer. Que revelação terá este parto? E que coisa significava para elas? Ela era realmente quem pensa havia? De repente, corta, morte toca, ela vira um mundo. Sempre-me quieto. Somente. Uma coisa importante. O que significa para todos nós. Nothing felt safe anymore. They were all caught in a web he never saw coming. The dust hung heavy in the air, wrapping around Richard like a shroud. He gulped, his heart pounding, as he stared at the envelope resting on the ground. A birth certificate, but what did it mean? He felt like he was drowning in a sea of questions. "Maya," he whispered, shaking. "What have we uncovered?" Her gaze flickered between the paper and the chaos. It seemed as if her world was teetering on the edge of a cliff, moments away from tipping over. Richard wanted to grab her shoulders and shake sense into her, but fear held him back. Reaching out, he brushed his fingers across her arm, a desperate attempt to connect through the overwhelming storm. But then, just as she opened her mouth to speak, another sound shattered the silence. A loud, familiar voice echoed through the store. "Isabella!" a man shouted, rushing towards them. Richard turned sharply to see Tom, the kind-hearted officer, barging in, his expression fierce. "Get down," he pointed, demanding authority amid the chaos. "What are you doing here?" Richard asked. Confusão, twistei no seu gato. Tom não respondeu. Ele deu passo para pensar, enquanto leu. Agora estava preso entre medo e indignação. A gripe Tom tinha na sua arma parecia eletrificar o ar. "Maya," Richard pleaded, mas her focus was locked on a unfolding drama. Está tarde para tudo isso. Leu ristava, as bravadeiras fadando, enquanto a treva num próximo. Mas então, como o caos superava ao redor deles, o mundo de novo quinguitara, como se guiassem por uma mão invisível. Dom, seu poderá ter mais a entender com quem vocês estão lidando. Aquele momento, a súbita explosão eruptou da parede da loja. Outro balou, quebrando tubo desastre. Pessoas gritavam e mergulharam para a cobertura. Ricardo grabou a Maia, ungindo-a a mais pude. Mas através do caos, um choque de realização atinge o pensamento deles. O era happening for a reason. Someone wanted all of this to play out. Within the smoke, figures shifted. Richard squinted through the haze. The officer was now closer, but his face twisted in horror. "Everyone, this is part of a plan. The whole thing was a setup," he roared, sending shockwaves through the crowd. "Maya, they're after you." A sudden chill coursed through Richard's veins. Leo's smirk returned, but now it was twisted, darker than before. "You didn't think it was just about petty theft, did you?" He laughed, the sound sick and twisted. "You're playing a part in something a whole lot bigger." Richard's heart dropped. What did he mean? And then it happened. A revelation that... Ir-se trouxe a confusão. Behind Tom, uma figura mágica viu alguém que poucos esperavam. Era a mãe de Maya, ficando de frente à sua cara, os olhos iluminados de fogo. No momento seguinte, ela levantou a mão e apontou um fingueiro para Maya. E jurava, voz rua, foi Tom em um arco, iluminando pratos, algo elétrico no meio. Um murmúrio repolou a multidão. "I'm not!" Maya voz vobulou, desespero na cara dela. "Maya, não!" Richard pediu, mas a verdade pesava mais firme no ar como nevada. A urgência envolveu-as. Qual dela? Earl he thought he knew a stranger. Shadows danced around them, lives intertwined in a web of deception too tangled to discern. And just like that, as the revelations pierced through the air, the weight of possibility shifted. Richard stood at the edge of an abyss, everything he believed crumbling into dust. In an instant, he realized that his quest to save Maya was only just beginning. What more had they yet to uncover? And would they survive the truth now looming before them? The dust lingered thick in the air, swirling around Richard, Maya, and the remnants of chaos. He felt the weight of the moment, everything unraveling like a fraying thread, when Maya's mother had shouted that she didn't give birth to her, It's as if reality had cracked open. He looked into Maya's eyes, searching for the girl he thought he knew. But fear and confusion danced there, mingling with the flickering flames casting shadows across her face. "Maya, please!" He blinked, desperation clawing at his throat. "Trust me, we can figure this out." She hesitated, her fingers trembling against the cold metal of the birth certificate. Richard could see her world tilting, the innocence of childhood drifting farther away. "Mom, what do you mean?" Maya's voice cracked, quivering with unfiltered hurt. Across the floor, the crowd watched the strange unfolding drama, whispers rising like a tide. Then, without warning, a loud crack shattered through the air, a burst from the back of the store. Richard flinched, eyes darting to the source. The shaking ground sent shockwaves through them, and he instinctively pulled Maya closer. The smell of smoke thickened, wrapping around them like a serpent, slithering closer in the chaos. "Maya, get down!" he shouted, squinting through the haze, but everyone was moving now, panic bubbling up like boiling water. Tom, the officer, was weaving through the debris, shouting orders. "Move! Get everyone out!" But as he pushed through, another figure emerged from the other side of the aisle. Pale and frantic, eyes wild. Richard squinted. It was Isabella, still frail, but somehow managing. "Para lutar com tis ansiedade, Isabella", Richard comandou, e mais 1 milhão de passos. Isabella, esperando que pensasse em abraçar o feito. Feito. Seu Maia, Isabella, tinha que lhe dar pedreiro ao meio, pois aí ao passo, e seu Maia, saiba que não para. Depois, nunca mais medo. When shake, with a force that knocked Richard off balance, an explosion erupted on the other side. Hot, fierce, and sending everyone scrambling. The walls cracked, blinding light spilling through. Richard shielded Maya as debris rained down, but amidst the chaos, a voice shouted louder than the destruction. "You're too late." Leo's figure stood amidst the flames, unscathed, with a sinister grin, the detonator gripped tightly in his hand. "You've all played your parts perfectly." Time seemed to stretch as Richard's stomach dropped. "Leo!" Richard shouted, but deep down he sensed he was too late. The realization crashed over him. This was all a setup? For what? And then suddenly, an electric jolt coursed through the room. Something cold, metallic, hit Richard's gut. He turned, hand instinctively reaching for his own pocket, but it was empty. The urge to fight was overshadowed by a new feeling of dread as his heartbeat thundered in his ears. "Maya," he gasped, but just as the name left his lips, shock flooded his senses. The envelope burst open in her small hands, revealing papers that scattered like leaves caught in a whirlwind. "Look!" She held up a photo, its surface glinting, and Richard's heart stuttered. It was a picture of Maya, a child, but beside her, another child. One who looked almost identical, uncomfortably familiar. His breath hitched. This child had the same bright eyes, the same smile, the same unmistakable innocence. "What is happening?" he whispered, tongue thick in his mouth. "Who is that?" A storm of realization swirled around him as Leo grinned wider. "Twins, Richard. 2 lives wrapped in one. The
key to the prize was to turn your trust against you. Everything felt like it was crashing down. That was not just any random photo. It shattered everything he thought he knew about Maya's life. "Maya," he faltered. "You're not just, you're special." But the deafening explosion consumed all thoughts, and then it hit, a wave of force, pushing Richard back. The ceiling sagged, the world tilted, and his heart hammered as darkness swallowed him whole, as everything whirled in chaotic obscurity. One fierce thought reverberated within him. Could they survive the truth? Would they ever escape the labyrinth of lies that tied them together? The last image Richard held before everything went black was of Maya's
eyes filled with pain, confusion, and the dawning realization that nothing would ever be the same. The world rushed back in, crashing over Richard as he regained consciousness. He blinked against the haze, his body aching. The intense heat of the flames flickered in the corners of his vision, pushing him to spring up. Maya. His voice was raw, desperation spilling out. He turned to see her across the chaos, still clutching the photo, confusion swirling in her eyes. It's a trap. You need to get out. He pushed off the ground, adrenaline coursing through him, urging him forward. Leo's voice rang out, sharp and cold. You think you can escape? You're all pawns in this game. Ele gestionou com fome, flamas ao redor. Richard's heart raced. A ferocidade nos olhos de Leo era desesperada. Maya, venha! Richard shouted, lutando através do esmoco e raiva. Sentia que estava correndo contra o tempo. Cada segundo foi estrito à eternidade. De repente, Isabela puxou a corrente. Tem que confiar em mim, não te trair. O rosto feio, com o peso da emoção. Richard hesitou, mas a urgência adoeceu. He yelled, faz sim, bem. Que parem, Maya. O momento se encolando com tensão. Um jogo aperta o pau debilho, sendo montes de debris caindo. Richard shielded Maya as best que pôde. O pressimento calor era demais. Suffocate. Maya, lixe no mim.
E gravou as soltas, forçando ele a ver a sua mão. Isso não é sua falta. Nós vamos resolver isso juntos. Seus olhos refletiam de lágrimas estrenidas. Depois, à medida do caos, um flicker de esperança ignitou. Sirenes cantando o caos fora. A lembrança de que ajuda pela porta. Senti a cura. Maya, trouxe-me. Chamou-se até o Is. Gemeu os olhos, e naquele instante, um bonde forjado através do caos em pleno. Ok, ela determinada, espartou profundamente em seu ventre. Vamos seguir para frente, blocando, caótica.
Rubble and outstretched hands reaching for escape. Leo's voice echoed behind them, wavering in desperation. Get back here! Tom stepped into their path, eyes fierce. We're clearing the area. Get out now! Richard nodded, dragging Maya beside him. Stay close. They barreled through the exit, the world outside awash in colors and noise, but it felt like freedom. The fresh air hit them with the force of a storm. They stumbled to a stop, gasping, anxiety pulsing through their limbs. Sirens wailed louder, the heavy thud of boots rushing past. Officers swarmed the scene, urgency mingling with confusion. Amid the commotion, Richard turned back, taking in the raging inferno behind them. The chaos, betrayal, and truths they uncavaram na rangue endenhar. But como a bucha caiu e as figuras de autoridade em movimento, abriu-se o olho. Leo estava ainda lá. A realidade do por aqui estava pronta para eles. Um caminho incerteza lá. E abriu-se o olho e percebeu uma coisa restando. A eles ter que bater aconteça. Maya, o que quer que seja. We'll face it head on, he promised, squeezing her hand tightly. For the first time, a flicker of warmth ignited between them. They could no longer remain in the shadows. The journey was just beginning. Questions lingered like smoke. Who were they truly? The vibrations of the world felt alive, bursting with possibilities, demanding their next move. And time marched on, relentless. Hey, if you've been captivated by this journey, you need to subscribe now. Don't wait 1 second longer to join our community. Hit that like button now to fuel the algorithm and keep these stories alive. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories about this wild finale. What does it all mean? And share this video with at least 5 friends who need to know about this explosive ending. This is the time to show your support. Let's keep the adventure going together.